Hong Orjun Yerjun Shanzan Bama Gisar Dombola Yamson Joko Mujuni Bama Jonis Quando Mambu Gorji Jiza Dodger Ji Shinji Labja Zaza Gura Bama Zada Orjun Yerjun Shanzan Bama Gisar Dombo Yamson Joko Mujuni Bama Jonis Jisa Dang Godang Quando Mambu Jiza Dodger Ji Shinji Labja Zaza Guru Bama Sada Horje Jin Sha Bama Gizara Dombola Yamsan Joko Nguju Naman Joni Jisa Jang Gudang Ganjo Mambu Dodger Ji Shinji Labja Zaza Guru Bama Sada Oma Hum Bandaran Guru Bama Sada Oma Hum Bandaran Guru Bama Sada Umahum Bandarangara Bama Sada Umahum Bandarangara Bama Sada Umahum Bandarangara Bama Sada Umahum Bandarangara Bama Sada Ho Jela da Jan Zora da Bindi Dozo Ganda Nibi Zabjo Yadan Bon Dabzo Jawa Chudang Jajin Beram Zada Zora Jumdan Dim Gombon Jahora La Shanza Lo Ganga Lo Ju Juni Jumja Nyada Nandara Se Jini Donga Jumja Jumja Niji Dakara Lawan Tora Mara Mando Dungara Jizar Rozo Ganla Vaju Darzi Yanla Juje Yandas Rudra Jejo Nyamo Nyalon Leje Jado Jomza Naru Manzir Dungara Nyaga Janye Jomza Rajan Done Daja Sabjin Darzo Yonda Lizo Jeje Do Jabjab Jadam Jani Janje Daluman Yanla Andada Omara Bazanarda Omara Bazanarda Omara Bazanarda Omara Bazanarda Umara 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 Bazanarda Tuduna Jijin Jero Wazera Jedalo Dama Mambarazan Guadan Damju Jonlu Domba Nuju Rubi Nawa Jeta Soro Nyaji Jimbo Tuduna Nimi Zone Molo Jimbo Ngadiat Pagaradangam Zamdu Jemerdo Domba Tiji Janla Chantarlo Oh ya tatani terang Natsu Dana Yopi Tani Poru Panda Nambadang Tani Yarig Namba Tani Nashoko Mare Tani Chujwa Tamshapola Tani Gomo de la Jagin.
Good evening again this evening to everybody who is here tonight, Tibetans, Chinese and people from America.
Tani Terang Atsu Chucha Tani Jivi Kapsa Tani Yang Karsang Atsu Shabada Shigbari Tomer Tani Atsu Terang Chucha Jigoya Jimson de Kanrazina, Tani Yang Atsu Shangshim Shot Simki Ba de Gore.
So, just as last night we started the teaching by casting the proper aspiration, this evening we are also going to begin our teaching with generating bodhicitta.
Tani Shangshim Simzia Dena, Tabachimbo, Chongma de
And bodhicitta is the absolute spirit or essence of the greater vehicle.
Perna Mustilam Sonatini Chi Karchishu Mumati, Tinita Koranga Tsitore. De Tavazala, De Tanjava Goni, Tinita Bachimbote and Koranga Tsito Mumati Kanrazina, the Shanship the race.
So as one's own life is the most important to any person and every person, bodhicitta, the heart of awakening, is the absolute most important thing to the greater vehicle.
Tani Sanjiga Tabala, Natsu Sanjiga Tabatila Taba Chimbo Tang, Taba Chung Chung Zini, 아니 드니 예시와 짐선데 강레지나 탁바 침볼라 샹집지 셈요 드니 탁바 만발라 샹집지 셈메 드니 짐선 띠토네 드니 침보당 총총제니 드니 예시와레스.
The reason that we distinguish between the Mahayana vehicle and the Hinayana vehicle, the two vehicles, is that the Mahayana vehicle possesses bodhicitta or is characterized by bodhicitta, whereas the Hinayana vehicle is not characterized by bodhicitta.
드니가 좀 베나 상지 금든라 드니 마르메 쇼반버나 메토콘 쇼반버나 쇼바즘버나 베나 상지 샤자타바 금든타 상지 샤자타바 그즈든다 보치글라 드니가 좀 쇼바즘버나 단팀 쇼반버와 게와티 드니 탁바 침보 게와리다 탁바 총의 게와리다 탁바 총총의 게와리다 강레제나 드니 예와시야 예와시야 오마티 강라 등두즈나 드니 샹칩 그 셈텔라 드니 등두스.
So if we make an offering before an image of a Buddha, an offering of flowers or an offering of something else, then the way that we evaluate or can distinguish the merit of that offering is the aspiration according to which we make it.
드니 가서 샹칩 그 셈그 통니 샹칩 그 셈그 드니 마지 마지 띠 통니 가서 베나 상제라 드니 마르미 퍼난다 드니 사르제라 드니 tin 초바 잠바 퍼난다 강타라 드니시나 드니 타텔라 탁바 침보 게와 제그레.
And if we make an offering of a butter lamp, for example, before a Buddha statue, and we do it with the aspiration of bodhicitta, then what we've achieved is the merit of the greater vehicle.
드니 다 샹심 삼바 샹심 속도 셈기 바티 메 드니 렁거 돈다글라 시타 나랑랑니 드니 코르와가나니 타르와 토비아 드니 돈도 드니 상기 금들라 초반바라 마르미 퍼난다 메도 퍼난다 강신난다 드니 드니 게와텔라나 드니 또다 탁바 만바 탁먼지 게와제 드니 제그레.
But if we were to perform the same offering, the offering of a butter lamp or some other kind of offering before the Buddha, and to do it with the aspiration that myself personally, be free from suffering, be liberated from samsara, if that were our aspiration, then that would be in accordance with the Hinayana vehicle.
드니가 저 야거 그 반스다 상지니 바타와 드니 파르던 아드샤 조지 아드샤 드니 콩고 가레송어제나 타바 침보다 타바 만바 차버티 강레제나 샹십 그 세미오메테레 손에다 딘디 송어레스.
And in fact, how Atisha, the Venerable Atisha, drew this distinction between the Mahayana vehicle and the Hinayana vehicle, the greater and lesser vehicle, so to speak, was precisely on the point of bodhicitta.
드니 가서 친디 토랍 샹십지 셈 드니 산옙바 양딱바 드니스 드니 용 소나다 빼메바티 공나 메바레스 가르티 딘디 마용나양 샹십 그셈 숑고 잡보 증인 잡보 드니스 드니 테 요나양 테 하정가 드니 돈닥 침보레스.
So it's extremely important that we do have bodhicitta as our aspiration in practice.
드니 돈닥 침보 간다즈레제나 ngachu chuna la ta tin song du ze pe na ngachu chen di thola shang chi ji sim ta zingin jabo shonggo jabo ma to tin me na yang tin ta zingin da shonggo tin ri chongchong ta tin ri ma tin ri yo na yang di tin ge wa la tin ni tin che shima la tin ngachu shang chi sen hua tin zambol lang tin mo yong su zok pa la tin ta pan token tin ri shang chi sen hua tin ren ro re song ni tin So
even if our bodhicitta is only as small as a shadow, or as flimsy as a shadow or a thin piece of paper, it's still very important, and it will bring great results in our future lives.
드니 자바다 드니 머자가 캬버려 말이 소소 그냠슬레나 chokres.
In terms of bodhicitta and the practice of the greater vehicle, there is no distinction between men or woman or layperson and those who are ordained with vows. Anybody can apply themselves to these practices.
Tendi indi shanshipji simte karte nga su jilla ke sona teni digba thamche poyang teni ta shanshipji sim jilla kina te par tak dogres.
So if we are able to generate bodhicitta in our consciousness, then all of the defilement that we have accumulated in our consciousnesses can be purified.
Teni sonum yana teni ta shanshipji simte jilla kina sonum yar ja chimbo kuni kondam peryong gore.
And with the generation of bodhicitta, so our merit and virtue will increase, constantly becoming bigger and bigger, more and more.
Ta te tok thamchipo te ja chimbo gone shigona teni nga su shunjik teni lega tangbo na la teni songyore teni sama ga lojong ya po jero jis shunjik shanship sen hui shopa lanjik pa ru xin luan ya.
The way of the Bodhisattva. Yes, the way of the Bodhisattva.
Yeah. Nga so tari shanship ke sem ke phanyun te so terang nge shaya te tab di bore te ja chipun dawo ina teni shanship shunjik teni lega tangbo na la di pin lega tangbo na la teni songyore teni chama te la lojong ya po jero jis.
Yeah. So tonight Kempo is placing great emphasis on bodhicitta. It is in fact very important. It's mentioned in the first chapter of the Way of the Bodhisattva, and it's something that everybody needs to apply themselves to in their study. And from here we will begin tonight's teaching.
Tani domba jia ta tani gemning ga domba jia ta te ni poteres terang ga chuchete.
So the topic of tonight's teaching is the refuge, taking refuge, and also the 4 lay precepts.
Tani ti kongdo ta nga cho jamru jia te kangri zela zegare tani gemning ga domba jina kangri zela zegare tani gemning ga domba yin na ja jamru domba yin na te jirgona kangri je go re jine. So
before we go on to, before we proceed to taking the vows or moving into that part of the teaching, I'm going to explain the background, the necessary background to both the taking refuge and taking the lay precepts. I'm going to explain what it actually means when we undertake to take refuge or when we take these vows.
Tendra po gushiwa tawaris jamru tinga so namba sanje pa teni nangla chu jigya teni tap chabarwate tap zu deres tap shi zu deres.
So to sort of put it briefly, what we mean when we're talking about taking refuge, it's really about entering the gate of the Buddha Dharma. As we would enter the door when we need to come into the building, it's about entering the gate and in so doing, taking the most expedient path into the Buddha Dharma.
Teni jamjo te nga so teni ta chu nangla jigya gunja yimbi tondak te gandis rezena perna jamjo domba te mena si teni nga so jamjo domba te jemena teni namgin nga so sangye la tapayo chula tapayo teni namgin nga so teni gewa drup teni yinna tarung teni namba sangyewa zeg mares.
So why is it necessary for us to take refuge if in the ordinary course of things we have Buddhist faith and we do meritorious activities, why is it necessary for us then to take refuge in addition to these things?
Teni nam nang ba sang jiwa rinjo ore zena nam nga cho chamru udon ba jena teni nima teni nga cho teni nang ba sang jiwa zegre.
But in actual fact, by simply having faith and doing meritorious activities, we're not considered a Buddhist, a proper Buddhist. The point from which we can consider ourselves proper Buddhists is the point that we take refuge in the Buddha Dharma.
Da tenri indi nga cho chamru teni nga cho nang ba sang ji ba go na la rochit ke teni tapshi zu de yin zeni teni shag go ya jimsen de tenri zere.
And that's why we refer to taking refuge as the most expedient and best means for entering into the door of the Buddha Dharma.
Teni ta chamru ze ate kangdis gla teni ngunzen go reze na chamru khorang go ngote kangdis rezenas.
So what is the essence? What is the essence, the basic essence of taking refuge?
Teni pe jana nga cho pena ta bu chung chung to so teni ta chunja yana chi teni chokchak jamba da teni ge teni te di ona teni khorang ga ama je ni teni ama ga tong la teni te jing ro res bu chung chung so.
So to give an example, it's like a young child who has who is leading a dog or an animal.
Yeah. Teni di kapsa teni te di nangla teni ta bu chung chung se chö te di ona teni khorang chela chak ne teni ama ga teni zhongla jing ro re te yin di nangla teni donda ni nga cho di thola ko len chok res donda ni ge thone nga cho di thola samlo tang ji dos khorang bu chung chung la teni chö te di ona teni ama zini ta khorang te ama ga zhongla jing ro re ba ya ta te la nga cho
So the child who is leading or is shooing along a dog or another animal, upon seeing their mother, turns away from the animal and rushes towards their mother, crying "Ama." There are two things about refuge that we can learn from this example.
Ya, ta tindri indi ti thola samlo ta ni kang yo zena tonda tambo ti teni pogu chong chong so teni cheu khola teni muk teni cheu khola zongore khola ma chegere samni teni khela teni chak yo re teni tonda tambo ti teres.
The first thing is that the child perhaps has fear that the dog that they were leading was going to bite them, and it was based on fear that they ran to their mother.
Teni tonta nipati kangrezena teni bu chung chung te samlo tana ngaranga amaga teni ngala rukche gere teni ta ngaranga amaga teni ngarangla teni kyoga teni ma mushiria teni shegere ngarangla rukche gere ngaranga amala rukche ga nipati yore samni bu chung chung na kolati yichiti yore te tonta nipare.
And the second thing is that the child, in rushing to their mother and away from the dog, was doing this because he or she believed that their mother had the ability, the capacity to help them, to protect them from the dog and its attack.
Oya ta ten jawas ke goni ta te nga chok pere te ta pere te ni dong ko thoni sha na kan rizere zena khta wa te kan rezena khte nga chok pe chu ngubo gang ko pere zena te nga chok khamsam khorwa Koran la nga cho kirga nan chig tini dungur mambundu tesu tamju pope na khirta ware ta nga cho khorwa la chagni kirga nan chig dungur la chagni tini nga cho kirga nan chig dungur te par meba shi samni tini lama kom choksam la tini kyapsin rogre.
So that example of the child rushing to his mother was an example, but what we can actually draw from that in terms of what the basic meaning of that little example was, that the dog who is threatening the child is really like samsara, birth, aging, sickness, dying, etc. Samsara, and the way that it, in fact, follows us, and the way that we feel fear towards it and want to get away from it, and rushing to or turning for refuge to the Buddha Dharma is like a child turning to his mother.
다 딘디 디톨라양 알아서 어떤 삼로 단계 닌도스 삼로 단계 담보데 강들이지나 토머 가초 더니 코르와 더니 등물 더니 게가 난치가 등물당 더니 알아서 못다올라 삼로 담바이나 머스치거티 체치라 더니 등물 하정 mambo 더니 누즈이도 대소 탐주 볼라 짝니 더니 다 나랑 그 추즈 듬나 더니 가사레 삼로 더니 그 삼로도 게레 마토 가딩아 주 게가 난치라 더니 머짝 더니 감슴군 코르와라 지징 머짝 더니나 가서 곰속선라 짭스양도 고 마리스.
So the first important thing that we can draw from that is that it's necessary really for us to turn to refuge, to seek refuge in an attitude of fear towards samsara, of great apprehension towards samsara, of the suffering that it entails, the great suffering that everybody in fact has in their lifetimes. It's very important that taking refuge is done with an attitude of great fear of turning from that and turning towards a safe refuge. If we, in fact, don't have this attitude, then there's really no reason for us to be looking for safety if we're not, in fact, frightened of samsara.
Teni ngaso mo hajang ka mamboz ko teni tez par mugyang rangbo la ta shinken teso ko samlo tanana teni ta maumba na ta soso te nyarwa yeta tendro teni ko teni to lilena yang mo lilena teni mo worbo mo napa teni mo wangbo ma changwan jawo ta teni ko teni lilena ta te hajang teni to de chimbore dumur chimbore samni to mo mamboz ko no khorwan dela.
And then there are people who probably cast their eyes somewhat further, thinking about what's going to happen after this life, descending to the lower realms, becoming an animal, or better, becoming a human, etc. There are people, that is, I suppose, the next level of attitude.
Teni ngaran chu teni khorwa machin de la teni rewa halli pa chembo zu shi ni teni ta machin di na la teni nga so chu demo da kebo deskit teni yakbo zu yongre samne teni nga so rewa chane ta talo demo mayon na ta sampo yongre sampo teni demo kebo mayon kable mambo jap teni shawalam ro mayon na ta nampo nga la teni yakbo zu yongre samne teni nga so teni rewa kyang ga goni teni ro yores.
So what we do need to think is that we need to be taking an attitude of great positivity towards what's possible in the future in terms of our happiness and luck and other things that are going to happen. If these things have not fallen at our feet right now, it is possible that they will happen in the future.
Teni ngacho rewa kyang teni che yore ta inna teni ta talon ro sampon ro losing ro lo ni ro losum ro teni kale teni ngacho yongya ga teni rewa chimbo shi yo pi teni demo ta kebo ta teni dechit zea teni jijik teni te yongyo mari tsena teni ga thola rewa chimbo ga ti nala kale teni zandro res. Even
though going like this, being positive and optimistic that the good things are going to come tomorrow, even if they're not today, if they haven't happened today, even though it's something that is quite reasonable and many people operate like this. In fact, if we continue to expect that tomorrow is going to be better than today, but it never sort of eventually arrives, then eventually our hope will become extinguished.
Teni nala yar lebe yong kapse teni mamboz ke teni tondak te ha go yong go so rang te shi yong.
And for many people, after 40 or 50 years of living like this with this kind of attitude, then they eventually come to understand, in fact, how things work.
Teni kapse teni nga so mamboz ke sem nala teni ta njiktak teni ngatak yong go ta message la kable mambo jab teni digba mambo sak 든지 시요레 이 레와 강디 치즈고 돈닥데 치즈고 돈닥레제 무이르데 강레제나 다 데모단 키보고 돈닥레 드니 다 마체 체 로집체 납체 든지가 드니 만촐라 드니 데모 키보 마용나 드니 다 트치든 시가치 급제가 나라 다 첨보 용기 메와데 참아 하고 용 거래 든지 시용데 드니 뭐 망보고 셈나라 드니 직작 용거요레.
And so really after 40 or 50 years of this happening, constantly thinking that tomorrow is going to be better, and really applying a lot of effort, a lot of toil, a lot of hard work into making things better, making things happy, thinking that happiness and joy is just around the corner, after 40 or 50 years of this and it not arriving, then eventually someone understands and in fact begins to be filled with fear. Fear because it is quite evident at this point that probably continuing in this way for another 10 or 20 years, it's really not going to happen the way they initially thought it was going to work.
Tendi indi teni ngaso sem ganala chunja tendi me songdi teni mo chama ga sem ganala teni sim tongbare te indi teni titoni jimsen titoni na ngaso tongbajena tongba nyeze ga maro kongshu teres te yembi jimsen ji teni mambo teni sem ganala jikcha yong teni sem ganala teni makepa yong sem ganala dumur yong ta tendi yone na teni chama makepa te modiwa tendi mambo ngaso pena gi용 그니나 왕차용 그니나 도탕용 그니나 tendiga mo changma yana da tendiga de dumur tendi mambo yung go.
And so there are many people who reach this point in a field and with great distress and great suffering when they reach this point in life and they don't have the Dharma. They don't have the benefit of refuge in the Dharma, the benefit of that stability that it brings. And on account of this, they feel a great emptiness in their hearts.
我们儒家就是要的是我们中观400论，我们儒家就是要的是，等于我们儒家是去听南罗了，等于干这送东西呢，我说学错个南了，等于没人把通报识的，等于人把麻木识，等于没了，等于人把你要的，等于人把通报没得说个呢，等于sem个南了，等这个等于他等会sem个头呢等会等于mambo就有那样子，往前有那样子，头上有那样子。Dini sem tomba imbi jimsenji sem ganala makeba mambu yone koransola sem toko dungerte haja mambu yongo yores.
In the 400 verses of the Mahayana treatise of the Madhyamaka treatise of the 400 verses, it said that there are two kinds of people. One kind of person is the kind that has a lot of wealth, who has a lot of power, has a lot of worldly and material things, but feels a great amount of suffering in their minds.
Dini ngaso shusoko nala yopi rimba mamu dini ta rimba mamu mutosona dini zaji meada gyunji meada dini tenji ga tondala ked kable mambu javne dini koso so de And
then the second type of person who's mentioned in the treatise are the people who occupy lower rungs in society, and people who often have to labor and feel great physical suffering as a result of their position in society vis-a-vis those who are well off and endowed with privileges and prestige.
So
everybody in society, everyone without exception, either every day of their life is experiencing mental suffering or physical suffering.
등물때라 하장 작아요 어리지 때빼나 가서 되니 보우 총총소 되니 다 킬라 작바다 버리.
And so the fear that people have towards the suffering of samsara, coming into samsara, being ill, aging, dying, etc., the fear that then we generate towards these things is akin to the child who fears the dog and runs towards his mother.
등물때서 발 매파테 간디시고 간디시나 가사레 삼니도 참마가 삼로 땅용디 되니 뭐 삼로 약보탕 신켄 되니 뭐 시르병켄 뭐 때서 삼로 땅나 되니 땅이 추즈 덤나 가사레 되니 추즈 덤자나 되니 리그 등물때 칼레 신이 멘조사레 캬버트 셈그 돈이 등물때 다 람상 되니 다 멘조지레 되니 옛나 되니 다 추즈 덤자나 되니 나랑 Gewatang, Gawatang, Nawa, Dumurtiso, Tini Par, Mebarin Rosare, Tini, Marang, Mutsiti, and Tondan Dambang, Aram, Dishtan Dambaz, Tsinditola Yungare, Maungbana Yungare, Samni, Mumamboza Kateni Tangi, Chuduna, Gasare, Samni, Tini Sam Gores.
So when thinking about and coming and confronting these kinds of suffering and think, well, what am I going to do to alleviate myself from these sufferings? Then those people who are bright, those people who are intelligent, who have wisdom, will see that the approach to take is to practice the Dharma, to turn towards the Dharma. And through doing that, they're able to alleviate gradually their physical suffering, but in particular their mental suffering, their inner suffering is something that in fact can be reduced quite rapidly and effectively by turning to the Dharma.
Tati kapsang atso tini to chute nyamlin shina tini ngarang ka semgadang ka dungmar sama mepakshi thukare samne atso chute la yichi ti kaps tini yongorezi ti yichi te perna bu chong chogo ta Tomerti korang kela chagne tini ngaranga amaga tini ngala rok jegre tini ngaranga amaga ngala rok jeyang shegre ta rokba shi thubgre samje koranga amala te bochungshong te yichi yorezi denja boshini tini ngaso yinna ta chut drvna tini ta ngarang tini dungmar mamboz meya tini yakboz yon thugre samne ngaso chutela yichi da tini zitini yolgo ore tini yichi te yo tsarti 땅에 추접고 연 삼네 되니 셈거나라 담자 켈린 담자 된지 용거래 어야 다 텔라티니 잠조제 그래 잠조 오티 테레스.
So the essence of refuge is to generate in one's heart from the depths of one's heart a really strong belief that the Dharma is what will be able to alleviate my suffering. By taking refuge, by practicing the Buddha Dharma, I will be able to alleviate my suffering in this life. Just as a child who turns to their mother to rescue them from the dog firmly believes in the capacity of their mother to rescue them from the dog, similarly, what we need to do is to generate a very strong belief that the Dharma has the capacity to alleviate our suffering, and on that basis, on the basis of that belief, to commit ourselves to firm practice of the Dharma.
야, 따티 돈다 담보레스. 드니 따 돈다 니파티 시작인스.
That's the first point, and now we're going to move on to the second.
드니 돈다 니파티 강레지나 땅아초 드니 잡슨로에 잠조인지나 드니 슬라 잡슨로 고레지나 잡슨로 사대가서 하고 고레스.
So the second thing that we need to know about is, what are we taking refuge in? Where are we going? What is the object of our refuge?
Teni sala capsundro gorezina teni gacho komcho khsumze gres teni sangire chure gindenje to so sum tela teni gacho capsundro gore te so sumbo tela teni gacho capsundro saze kavilze otinje zegres.
So the objects of our refuge are the triple gem, the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha. These are the three objects of our refuge.
Teni penang aso sharshok teni mamboz ka kanti samkarezena penang nge terang kyosula teni ta ti jamro dombati jinna teni mamboz ka teni ngala capsundro gore samne teni ngaso teni harshok mambo nala teni samkin yore te norare te marez.
A lot of people in the East think that when they take refuge vows from a particular teacher, that they are taking refuge in that person. But that's in fact a mistaken view.
Teni nge karishe grezena teni kyosola teni ta domba teni chamro domba teni mar teni to jinje inanja teni jam조 domba shiji titola leka kashi titola lekiori ngi ti leka di ngi legres ina chosu japsun rosati kumshoksom lanjo ore mato ngaranjo maris.
Even though I am performing a vital function in enabling you to take refuge, what you're taking refuge in is not me, but the three jewels.
다때인디 산지 강레제나가 좀 누르디보 레 라보시니샤나 산지 제제 산지 샤차타바 데니 곰보 오호메 텔라소바 산지 테솔라타게 그래.
So when we talk about the Buddha, to put it briefly, we're talking about the Sakyamuni Buddha, we're talking about the Amitabha Buddha.
Teni chuze야 돼 강라제 그래제나 teni 산지 샤차타바 송야가 추 탐시 보텔라제 그래. teni takpa chenpo chuye nanja, teni takman chuye nanja, denja wazi nga tsu sanga chuye nanja, mdo chuye nanja, chu tamshi pote la, teni chu zegret.
And when we talk about the Dharma, the Buddha's teachings, we're referring to all of the Buddha's teachings, including the Greater Vehicle, the Hinayana teachings, Vajrayana teachings, Sutric teachings, Tantric teachings. Everything that is considered the Buddha Dharma is what we mean by the second object of our refuge.
Teni gendens jida kangla zegzena ngaso te takpa chimbo da takpa chungchung nikala te zendao mares.
In terms of the third object of refuge, the Sangha, there's some slight difference between the Mahayana and Hinayana criteria or definitions.
Teni ngaso takpa chimbo jawo ina gendens de kangla zegzena ta pena shangship senhua, teni te shanrizu, teni pangpan jambo yang, ta te la sokpa teni shangship senhua te sola teni to gendens zegres.
In terms of the Mahayana vehicle, then bodhisattvas like Manjushri and that did he?
Jampayang.
Oh yes, and
oh yeah, teni Shanrizu.
Oh yes, and Chenrizik.
No, that te la sokpa.
Yes, these are the objects of refuge when we speak about the Sangha.
Teni ngaso takman jawo ina teni takpa mamba ina gendens ba teni gerlong muji yanchu teni gerlong la gerlong inari gerlong ma inari teni tila teni koranso gendens ba zin teni ngunjin chigret.
But from the Hinayana point of view, when we're talking about the Sangha, we're really talking about the Sangha, the monastic Sangha. So Gelung monks with the bhiksu vows.
Teni kantari anja teni ngaranso teni japsun roa ten dosa gendens ba teni tetsu tamchil la japsun ro gores.
But in any case, we, in taking our refuge, have to take our refuge in all of these as our objects.
Oh yeah. Tani te ngaso tonda nipa deres japsun rosati hakoya te tonda nipa res.
So this concludes point 2, which is talking about the objects of our refuge, where we're taking refuge, what we're taking refuge in.
Tani ta tonda sambati teni ngaso teni japsun rosar deres ta kandi gon ro gore jamrung ngomati kangrezina.
And then the third point is how to take refuge. How should we go about taking refuge? What should our attitude be? That's the third point.
Teni ta terang atondana teni tomba sanje shacha ta pa teni kchongchong chindus teni dana yang teni tomba sanje shacha ta pa kchimbo chindus teso tamchen teni sanje shacha ta pa ksap res terang teni sanje shacha ta pa rang ksap res.
So tonight we have here a very small statue of the Sakyamuni Buddha, and behind us we have a larger one, and these are replicas of and stand in place of the Buddha.
Teni ta ngarang chu sanje shakya ta pa kumden ni teni ngaso khilin ta tamja o teni su she go ri ti khilin zenanja tamja zenanja tela teni jamro zegres.
So before the Sakyamuni Buddha making vows, pledging promises, by doing this we are taking refuge.
Pena ngaso sharshokla teni ta gomba ganala sone teni jamro go domba da jina teni ta kyorang jamro go domba jisong zeni kyorang la langkhir teni teni tragrezi. 결혼라 랑치르 자그래 옛날에 랑치티 잠조 오래지나 말이지.
So quite often in the East, people go to a monastery or a temple and they take the refuge vows, and in return they get a booklet, a refuge booklet or a refuge pass that says on top of it, you have taken refuge, etc. Is this refuge? Is this really having taken refuge? No, it is not.
이 랑치르티 요나 코랑테니 지 곰반다 테소나라 코라 한 제산단 초바팔사소나 데니 랑치르티 파르토나 데니 코랑가테니 고카닌 징뇨 고마라 야른 로초코레 데 잠레 마토 잠바 테라 톤다치요 마레스.
This pass that says refuge on the front cover of it has no other meaning or usefulness other than enabling people who hold it to be able to go around visiting monasteries and going on pilgrimage and getting in for free without having to pay for a ticket.
야, 근데 가시가 되니다 결라 망스 또 거래지 되니 결랑 되니 잠주 지사나 결랑 가망라 찌찌찌세게 되니 결랑 나랑 걸 홈마레 되니 경일 홈마 찌찌찌자 보레지니 거랑라양 망스 되니 또 거래지 이나 되니 또 거랑 걸 홈마 마레지 꿈속 숨 산지 당 추당 긴든 걸 홈마레 마도 바디 멋지 걸 홈마 마레지.
And in many cases, a person seeking refuge will be given a Dharma name. They'll be told their new name is, or their Dharma name is this, that, and that they are now the student of such and such a Lama or monk or teacher. But in actual fact, through having taken refuge, one has not become the student of a particular teacher. One has become a student of the Triple Gem.
Tani ta chamjung ngumati kangrezina tari ngasu kongla shapati langchirte yang mari mangte yang mari chamjung ngumati susu rang semna yopi tamja tires.
So today there is not going to be any special refuge pass, and there are not going to be any Dharma names given. The real refuge that you will have taken tonight is by making a pledge, by making a strong vow in your own hearts to take refuge in the Triple Gem.
오야 테니 타 tamja karichi gourezina teni tamja sim gourez tamja sim.
So in order to take refuge, we need to pledge or make 3 vows.
Teni ngi tamja simbo te ki namba tamja pola par ngochu chegen teni ngochu chi kapse teni ki namba shokchini nyanni shokchini semna la tamja ya poche gourez.
So Kembo is going to introduce each of these 3 vows, talk a bit about them, and while he's doing so, could everyone listen and at the same time make the pledge in their own hearts?
Teni tamja simbote kangrezina tamja tambote teni ngaranso tomba sanji shacha tapa kumdni teni yar hajang nandan go goneze 하장 난든다 하장 잡는 그 권이지 非常庄严非常严肃 하야 하장 잡는 그 권이 되니 가서더니 켈린 담자시 고래 담자 강보도 강레제나 되니 가니마 대랑니스 하야 당니 기와니 치럽 담셨다 단 니마치라 나라양 상진로 고래 어디 상 마르기 그 파트 되니 네 되니 기르근제 고난다 나랑랑 그 톰바티 신제나 tani sanchi shakya tapati ngarang ka tomba yin samni tini tamjashi gores.
Okay, so we in an absolutely sincere and utterly solemn manner, we need to vow in front of the Buddha that from this point on until I achieve Buddhahood, that my teacher or my guide is the Buddha.
Tani ngarang ka tini tomba tini ngarang ka sanchi shakya tapati yinzi. Tani tomba sanchi shakya tapa mahtokpa jamba tani ngasun jitin ka kamla tani la je tani mangbu yori inna desu tamjupo ngarang ka tomba mun sambi tani tamja chikyang yang gogres.
And we need to pledge in doing this that aside from the Shakyamuni Buddha, aside from the Buddha, I will not have any other guide or teacher. Within society, there are all kinds of, or within the mundane world, there are all kinds of various potential people that we can rely on as teachers in various capacities. But this is something that we need to vow not to do. From this point on, our guide on the path is the Buddha.
Tatenti indi tamja ni res, tamja ni de kangar na tomba santi shakya tapa de ngarang tomba yin samba chigdang. Tani tomba santi shakya tapa le jamba 마임바 티니 직팅 걸 한다 렌다 티소 담주보 가는 것 돈바 문 삼바가 인 삼바치다 문 삼바치거든이 담자 니고 그래.
So we need two vows here, two pledges that we're making. The first being that the Buddha is my teacher, is my guide on the path, and the second that aside from the Buddha there is no other teacher, no other deity or ghost or any other substitute for the Buddha. So with these two vows, this is the taking refuge in the Buddha, the first part of the refuge.
Tani nibati chula capsundro waris, tani chula capsundro wati kandizala zegrezena, tani soso yang hajang zavnun gogoni, tani tang tamjashini, ni nima terang ni zonsteze, tani kiwa ni tsirp tamchit zegore mato banga, tsirchik potela zegmare, kiwa ni tsirp tamchit oya, tani ni chukang dribkuyin zena, tani sanje shakya tapa chuti nge dribkuyin ze, tani namba sanje wa chuti nge ranga tani dribkuyin sambaga tindriga tamja gore, tamja chikushi gore.
So the second part of the refuge is taking refuge in the Dharma. And in order to do this, we need to vow with extreme sincerity, undertake with extreme sincerity that from this day onward, for as many future lifetimes as it takes for me to achieve Buddhahood, that I will take refuge in the teachings of the Buddha, in the Dharma.
Tani tedang nyamdu kan samgo gorezena, tang sangi chu de dubko ye ma to ba jen nga chon zambalang la chu ha chang mangbo yori tani tani yena tani yamba chu tamchi pola ngarang ko zunjuk she ge yin zeng 정말 la zunjuk she ge yin na yang teng ngarang ga tani to ta sangi ge chu de ma to ba nge dbya te sangi ge chu ma to ba yamba ti song nge dubko men samne nge zunjuk she ge yin da yin na nge dubko men samne tani tamja chi go re.
And then the correlating second promise that goes with taking refuge in the Dharma is the sincere pledge not to take refuge in other kinds of teachings. There are all kinds of different teachings, religious teachings, mundane teachings that are out there. So the correlating promise or undertaking of taking refuge in the Dharma is the vow not to take refuge in any of other teachings except for those of the Buddha.
Ta tinding aso nge chuti tini sanji chuti drupko yin samba chik tang tini jamba drupko mun samba yin samba tamja chik mun samba tamja chik ti tamja nipo tela tani chula kyapsun ro wa zegres.
So the undertaking that I am going to practice only, I'm going to commit myself only to the Buddha Dharma, and at the same time not to the teachings of any other tradition or school, etc. This vow, comprised of two legs, as it were, constitutes taking refuge in the Dharma. And then the third part, taking refuge in the Sangha.
상지 시작자 바 금든니 가서 하정 잡는 거고니 어야 되니 네 니마 대랑니 존테 되니 나 상마르게 파르트스 되니 계와니 체르 탐치트 나랑 거더니 추 드야 거더니 쪽 되니 추 드로 답에 나가서 롭자는 게 나더니 롭쪽 다버리 어야 되니 대스연제나 되니 남바 상지 바 되니 추 듬큰금 tani gendan bate to thamche po tani ngi chudpi druk yin samne tani tendiga nyang thbani tani tamja chikse go res.
So taking refuge in the Sangha is vowing that from this day now until I achieve Buddhahood, that my companions on the path, my Dharma companions, are the people who are going to accompany me as if we were students in school, our classmates, those who accompany us in our scholastic endeavors, that our Dharma siblings, our community, are in fact those who are going to accompany us. Vowing this with great sincerity is taking refuge in the Sangha.
대당 냠도 되니 강삼고 그러지나 다네 상지기 추더니 다 좀큰 마인바 그더니 다뭐 잠발랑 그 추르고 잠바 탐지보 냠림신 그 뭐대다 탐지보는 되니 배낭 나랑랑 그 소쪽 있나요 초거리 양만나 나랑 그 쪽보 있나요 초거리 디 연적거리 타나가 저 점상식 그나는 거 되니 자상 그나니 되니 뭐지 있나요 하고 말에 연초거리 리티 대소 탐지보니 추드비 쪽 말에 삼니더니 네 추드비 쪽때 다 상지 시작자다 바 주냠슬링큰 대소 나랑 그 추드비 쪽으로 마토 바 말이지 잠바티도 나로 빼나 총잡으로 온다오다 자마자로 온다오다 되니지 레카레로 온다오다 되니 가서 쪽본다 되니 있나인 초거래 마토 바 추드로 말에 삼니더니 먼 삼기더니 담자든지 지고 그래서
So, taking refuge in the Sangha also involves recognizing that those others in our life with whom we might have significant relationships, our work companions or people that we hang out with, or even our spouses potentially, people in our family, that they, without being Buddhist practitioners, are in fact not those who are our Dharma companions. We need to be very clear about this, that our Dharma companions are practitioners of the Buddha Dharma. And pledging this, promising this with great solemnness is part of taking refuge in the Sangha, the third part of the refuge.
되니 잠볼랑 그 출력 잠바 냠슬랭큰 것들이 다뭐 수당 쓰였나 되니 가서 대 가상근이 가서 공대양 쉐요 되니 상지 것들이 남바가 왕듯이나 뭐때도 탐지 볼랑 가서 되니 샴당 냥집시 고래 뭐때도 탐지 볼라더니 준족시 고래 상마 고래 뭐때도 탐지 볼라더니 지더니 저 노바시 안다다 되니 다 뭐때도 탐지 득작을 삼진다 되니 그더니 삼로 되니 요 조금 말에 다 있나 되니 내가 주 추디비값스 되니 알아란 거 추족 말에 삽니다. 되니 고레스.
As we said last night, all of these other people are definitely worthy of our compassion. They're certainly worthy of our respect. They're certainly not people that we have any entitlement to direct malicious thoughts or wishes of harm towards, but we need to be clear that without being members of the Sangha, then they're not our companions on the path of the Dharma.
오야 되니다 가서 상지라 잡선도 갑서더니 겐던도 되니 네 남바 상지 바 추좀 건데 나랑 것더니다 추쪽 인 삼바 직당 되니 텔레 잠바 탐주봉 나랑 거 추쪽 문 삼바 인 삼바다 문 삼바 담자 니고리 티 담자 니포텔라 되니 겐던라 잡선도 와지 그래.
So with the vow and with the undertaking that those who are practitioners of the Buddha Dharma are my companions, my Dharma companions, and those who are not my Dharma companions, with that two-sided undertaking, we take refuge in the Sangha.
되니 가서 따따니 소소소데 셈근랑라 되니 담자니 보데 약보스 되니 더 쉐로지 되니 시소나 되니 가서라 되니 camro고 돈바 톰조고레 니마 대랑니 존티 되니 가서 상말라 되니 넘바 상지 바제 그래 되니 상지 식자다 바가 로마즈니 되니 그 망통조고레.
So with this pledge in our heart, from this day onward, until we achieve Buddhahood, we will be students of the Buddha Dharma. In this spirit and with this attitude, with this undertaking, we take refuge.
오야 다띵아서 되니 네 잠조래 되니 다 잠조 대샤 차송 소소 셈나 답득이 보지 지스.
So we've now finished talking about refuge. The introduction to refuge has concluded. So everybody please keep this well in your hearts and minds.
되니 다 니파띵아서 되니 다 giving 그 돈바nga giving 그 돈바지 기테리 되니 대샤케인스.
Now we're going to move on to talking about the lay precepts.
되니 셔당아서 되니 돈바텔라 다 상가 돈바지기다 되니 탁바 침보 장수생활 같은 돈바지기다 되니 가서 첨바 돈바지기다 되니 랍슌고 돈바지기 돈발라 하장 멍부요레스.
So within Buddhism, there are different kinds of vows. There are tantric vows, there are the bodhisattva vows, the pradimoksha vows, lay vows. There are different kinds of vows that can be taken.
Teni domba ti domba tso nangni teni terang ngaso domba kamsha kare zena teni givning ga domba ngaso chimna ti chimba zena ngaso teni rapshung mayimba tiso teni ta chungna chung choya ga teni domba ota terang ngaso tesha kare.
So the vows, the set of vows that we're going to be talking about tonight are those that can be taken by lay practitioners.
Teni domba ti teni thomar ngaso domba ti chung goya jimsang kangena samne teni ta kashi ge teni sam kare.
Perhaps some people might wonder about why it is necessary or why they should go about taking lay precepts.
Ta domba ti chung goya la shertang jimsang mangbun dozi ina tina nge chigni teni ngocho sheke.
Well, in fact, there are many, many reasons for why it's a good thing to take the lay precepts, why it's a beneficial thing to take the lay precepts. But tonight I'm just going to address one or two key points.
Teni thomar ngaso nangba sanji ba teni nyamling ga teni chute so sama sar dana teni tondak sim ga nala den rogres nyamling shya ga chute so sama sar dana tondak sim ga nala ndagres.
So from the point of view of practice, there are three main points that can be addressed.
Tondak sim de ga resena tondak tambo de ngaso domba sungya ga teni chchum ze gres domba chungya teres.
So the first point being the discipline that is entailed in taking vows.
Teni tondak nipati ngaso gum gyawya tangenzen zeni teni gum gyabki teres.
And the second is our meditation and our meditative state.
Teni tondak sambadi ngaso teni ta shirb teni ngaso teni ta anilik ton tokzena teni ngaso ju metse ton tokbatang teni anilik ton zhenxiang nilukuton yakbo shipitini sherab tere teni to sambo tela teni tsatamdang tangzandang sherab zeni sim res.
And then the third point is wisdom, insight into one's life, life's purpose, etc. So these are the 3 points.
Ta teni yindi teni ngaso tsatamde yona teni ta tangenzen ngaso yella yakbo kegre 당연전 때 약보지요나 때니 셰르브때 용거레지 때소 담주폴라 지라 요레지 때나 처첨데 메나 때니 가서 때니 다 곰약보 제토고 말이 곰약보 곰 마탐나 때니 가서 때니 다 족바침보 똥똑반다고 다 때니 그때니 닐그 똥똑바데 용탑고 말이.
Actually, these 3 points are fundamentally interconnected. If we don't have a good discipline, then it's difficult for us to obtain meditative stability. And if we don't have meditative stability, then it's very difficult for us to generate wisdom.
디 김선디 가리르지나 가서 돈바 약보수 송잖아. 돈바 약보수 송나 티리 가서 티 몰라 노파 마시. 데니 슈속라 티니 노파 마시파. 데니즈 티니 렌도레스.
And by taking vows, we are thereby not engaging in harmful activity. We're not engaging in harmful activities to society or to others.
Teni ngaso mosjigla sanlo tambaye na metsindi nangla teni ngaso teni mojambala nopa shia lehka tindi yang male teni shusokla teni nopa shia tindi lehka yang male tindi rina teni susurang ke sem ke nangla teni njopa 지지요 말에 때니 샘대 하자 담보레제 하자 껴부인 레제 샘거나라다 요반담라다 때니 녜증 말이 니 말에 때니 삼지 멍보요 말레제.
By undertaking not to engage in harmful activities or harmful actions towards others in society, towards society at large, then our minds will not be filled with remorse and regret. And we will have a much greater stability in our own minds.
Teni semganala tendi nongwa njopa nongjo zena tonshire tendi semganala tendi njopa mambo mena teni gomjabna sem mariapo shine teni to ndutop korezi te maina ngaso sem gomjabni chonzen dingna ya teni semganala ta nge jigmar nge pena 지금 다 무슬라티네 노파케잖아 다티 노파케잖아 다티 나스르 노파케 에용삼 당에테 파르칸디치 고삼 다 총즈 잡네티네 무잠바즘 고코르탕잖아 tani ngarang la ti thone chi no pa zre yong mayong sam ni ti semter ha jang mong bu yong gore semter mang bo yo na tani sem mar gom gyap thab gumare se.
In terms of our meditation, if we're constantly worrying or feeling bad, concerned, anxious, or regretful about harmful activities we have inflicted on others, somebody I've harmed, what are they going to do to revenge me, and then what am I going to do in response to that? Or perhaps a person who in doing business has tricked other people, and what are they going to do in response? Without having to think constantly back and forth with quite an afflicted mind about the regretful with regret and anxiety about the harmful things one has done to others, then it is possible to attain a much greater stability in meditation.
Tani ngacho nangba tani di domba di nangla no tani tamcho ngacho tani chipena musab manyamba rao kushi manyamba tani ngorkor tang me machokwa rao tani ngacho shisok tani ta kunlong lunli tao ta zike shisok kunlong ka kunshuk ka wang shina tani ta tani shina mundba tani ta matok ba dele jamba ngacho boba tani longtong rang lu jiao tiao zhuyi oya tani ge就龙咱们是跟那了但今生jamba ji men de chok ma chok ya tani chicken no mares.
So when we talk about the content of the vows, it's not as if it's some kind of dogmatic morality, you can't do this and you can't do that, without there being a good reason for it.
Tindi ending aso tini ta domban de so tini ta yagbo so song jana tini so rang tini shiso ko tone tini me yagbo me jambala tini no pa machine kan tini te te me jamba namla tini pamba tini te do tongken tini chumten lungten ko tini me yagbo o tini zire ndo reze domba de song jana.
So by taking on the vows, we pledge to become people or individuals who don't do harm to others, who don't do harm to society, who don't cause untoward actions to others. This is to be a good person, a person who conducts themselves in a way that is harmonious with society, law, etc. Essentially a person who is not going to be harmful in their actions.
Teni me yarab teni chumdam thamkan lecture-dam thamkan teni to je shosore mo gate to lo no pa machine kan teni re sona teni so rang sem na la teni sim ha jang demo sim ha jang kebo teni ngare teni yin sarti teni gom gyam na sem na la le la po teni gom de kyong gore.
And as a result of becoming a person who lives like this, in accordance with the precepts, so by not harming others, by being someone who lives according to the mores of society, we will obtain a very stable sense of mind, a calm mind, and as a result of that, our meditation will come much easier.
Teni ti jimsang chigre teni jimsang nipa ti kang re jena nga chu domba ti sungna teni halipa ga tila teni phayun chimbo sunum chimbo teni yore.
And then the second reason that we take these vows is because in doing so there is such great benefit and such great merit in doing so.
Penna nga chu domba maji pi kaps namgin yinna teni nga chu penna teni ta gom gyapa da manan domba da teni shang chaya da teni nga chu gewa dripi kaps gewa yore ma to ba nga chu gewa ka ke madum nen teni ding du pi kaps yana chang thong chamba za yana nyar ne yo pi kaps teni gewa chi yo marezi ta namgin domba maji pi kaps teni zres.
So prior to having taken these vows, even though we might engage in practices like chanting or doing prostrations or meditation, etc., then the kind of merit that is generated as a result of these practices is entirely different.
Tani ta domba te ji tsari ji su chin ri re zena bena nga chu domba na ka chig jena ni jena sim jena tini domba ji tsarna tani domba te nyam ma song ko part tani nga chu chi ta gewa dripi kaps pena tani shang tsarya ta gom gyawya ta tani kaps ta gewa leo re ta te ma chu tani nga chu tani jo de zamazavi ne kapta tani monavla tani khabda kaja shepi ne kapta tani thana nga so nyin ni yopi kapse na ti domba ta nga so semgana la yo charti tani ti gewa ta koni pher kres.
So after having taken the vows, not only do we generate merit when we're undertaking practices like meditation or recitations or prostrations, etc. But even when we're eating and even when we're sleeping, the very fact that we've taken these vows and that we've pledged in our hearts to abide by them, up until the point, of course, that they are broken, then our merit continues to grow and grow and grow, even when we are in a state of sleep or eating or just some kind of other mundane activity.
The ending also dombati kanresina pena nikang la gormo jang bayana tati niski yar nimasiri chiri yaratini to peranda oda. Yana pena also gormo mombo kersone mavjana tozu mavjana the Nicola kiki chimbo tini to Tokyo pena tinda ore also dombati chona tini gewa tini tone kiki chimbora correct.
So the merit that is generated through taking the vows is like having put some money in the bank and the interest that you generate year after year on it, or an investment that you make that brings you back more than what you initially put in.
Tatili jambangasu domba chona ge phayu halipa mambo songore te inda teso tamje pu susu rang teni pechangana la ta da yore terangasu ti tiso ko wang teni nima to tele jamba shek ment.
So these two reasons, these two benefits that I've just spoken about in relation to taking on the vows, there of course are so many other great benefits that flow from taking the vows. Tonight, for reasons of time limitations, I'm only going to speak about these two, but of course in your own readings you can learn more about the other numerous benefits. So, of these lay precepts, there are 5. So, of these 5 precepts, tonight, among those of us who are perhaps younger in age, those who have jobs in society, who do business, etc., it would be quite fitting and appropriate, very good, if you could take 3 of these precepts. And if it's not possible to take 3 of these precepts, then undertaking to take on 2 of them would also be very good. For those of us who are somewhat older in age, who no longer need to work, who no longer need to hold down jobs, then it would be wonderful if you could take all 5 of the lay precepts. But as to how many vows you decide to take on, to pledge to, whether it be 5 or 3 or 2, it is entirely a matter of your own decision. It's not a matter of me dictating to you. So, taking the vows, the practice of taking the vows, of course, is is very humane in nature, in its attitude. It's not a matter of forcing people to take them or imposing them on anyone in any particular way. It's very much about one's own free will and undertaking personally.
Teni domba ngaso sona domba chungya de teni ngaso sosola teni onunshi yali or teni sona teni yabo yomare.
If we feel great pressure to take the vows, if we feel under pressure, as if it's something that we have to do, then this is certainly not good at all.
Teni ngaso soso ranga nature tang teni thamba goni teni domba ni chungtona ni sem chungtona sem nga chungtona nga teni ni chungna yang ta nga butina ni gang chung te soso ranga thachona chokore.
So please, everybody, decide in accordance with your own circumstances, the own circumstances in your own particular lives, what vows you might like to take, how many you might like to take. Please do this in accordance with your own situation.
Tati gangrejinange ngaputi samala ngochuche gayen teni soso ranga yapoziteni nyanochi.
I'm going to explain a little about each of the vows. Please, everybody, listen carefully.
Teni ngi domba ngapote chiri ngochu shipine kamna teni choranso gota nyane ota ti domba ti ngarang chongna chongthar sare samna teni chorang ka thakchenni ta dngi chung yen samne thakchu go res.
When you're listening to me explain the respective vows, when you're listening and think, oh, that's a vow that I can take, that's a vow that I will take, then please think like this while you are listening. Undertake that in your own minds. When you listen to a vow being described, that is one you feel is in accordance with your own circumstances and that you will be able to keep.
Teni domba ngi marsha yombine kamna tati domba tingi chongthar samare tingi domba tingi jijana ngai domba tini te jinchung shithar samare tingi nyamro sare ngarnro sare teni samna teni kyora majina ya chokres.
And when you're listening, during the process of listening, if you think that a particular vow is something that you would not be able to take on in your particular life circumstances, it's not something you'd be able to keep, it's not something that's fitting or appropriate to your own particular situation, then this is absolutely fine.
Okay,
now I'm going to go through one by one each of the 5 precepts.
We're
going to start with the first precept as being the vow to refrain from consuming or becoming intoxicated through consuming alcohol.
We're going to start with Teni pe namjin pe na mason kin kumshin kin teni zin malam kin teni zin na yang teni chang thong ni zison na teni shawan ram mambo leong gre teni yendi chang man thong wa te nga zo domba na ne te kar chimbon rawala teni jokyo ret.
So why is refraining from alcohol important? It's important because some people, it's very difficult to draw a boundary really between what is intoxicated and what's not. Some people just have a little bit of alcohol and they become quite drunk. Anyway, in a state of drunkenness, it's extremely easy for us then to do actions that transgress the other vows, like kill people, steal things, tell great lies, etc. So it's quite important, the vow against refraining from alcohol, insofar as enabling us or preventing us from doing these other things.
Tanita changse ate countries la ze ndu zena nga chom nangba teni changse ate country la ngun jang gre zena teni donda ni changsona teni tela changse gre zi chang ge chanyi ding yi 때 강리제나 돈다가 니창나 차기 니창송나 되니 창제 그래서.
So, in defining what we mean by alcohol, there are essentially two criterion.
차기 니보디 강리제나 돈 당보 되니 다 창거 즈마 요사 양난 통장나 가능한 통나 되니 창거 좋아 요사 되니지 있나요? 되니 또 차기 당보들이스.
The first one is a liquid that has the smell of alcohol, or when tasted on the tongue, the taste of alcohol. So the taste or the smell of alcohol, that's the first criteria.
되니 니바의 강리제나 된 통나 망본 통나 되니 르진조 먼남 되니 통 망본 통장나 되니 르진조이 니바요나 되니 텔라 되니 또 창제 그래서.
And the second criterion is that if it were consumed in enough amount, would induce intoxication. That is the second criterion.
다든지 당보더니 창거 즈마요 좋아요 니바더니 망본통나 르진로지든지 니바요사 든지 인 차르디 더니 창가로였난다 창마르보였난다 더니 창마르보였난다 창결보였난다 대소 창말라 창제 그래서.
So as long as they fulfill these two criteria, that is having the taste and smell of alcohol and the capacity to induce intoxication, then any kind of, alcoholic beverage, whether it be white liquor or wine or sweet wine or sour tasting liquor, anyway, it's all the same, it's all alcohol.
디돈다 담보레스, 니 돈다 니파티 오나 창틴 통세 기타 간디젤라제거레지나스.
So that's the first point about this. And then the second is, what do we mean by consuming alcohol? What do we mean by the consumption of alcohol?
Then 통세야 돼 가지고 베나 리보라 박발라 마다 된지제나 가지고 되니 창거 득실시나 샤우두 득실시나 초콜릿 때라 창통세 말레스.
For example, if we had a wound on our skin and we needed to apply alcohol as an antiseptic, then this would not be considered consuming alcohol.
대 마츠티니 베나가서 카능라티니 저 마다 딘디제나 드니 창거티니 득실시고나 카능라 창거 득실시니티니 말 고반낭라 ཉet 초코 말했더니 시르르나 대양 초코레 때라 창통의 교용 말했.
And by the same token, if we had some kind of sore in our mouths and we needed to ingest alcohol to medicinally treat it without obviously consuming it into our stomachs and then spat it out again, then this would not be considered having consumed alcohol.
Tani ngaso makuni dinala tini ngaso chi yona tini chinda o tini yensare samnin thongjana tin kyoyo mares.
And if, for example, we mistakenly thought it was water and consumed it in what we call a swig, then this would not be consuming alcohol because we misapprehended it to be water.
다고나 강디즈라 tini thongje 그래जना tini dinala yo pate ngarang ka changyen ba hago de ngarang ka shi tini ngarang ka tini ngi changdin thongyin samne tini khananglan thongne.
So what we do mean by the consumption of alcohol is when we know very well that what is in that cup is alcohol, and that we, on that basis, we take it, we consume it, we swallow it. This is the consumption of alcohol.
촌마가나라 창대지 르그레스 데니 늪쇼크 베나치한테니 쪽리 든딘다고 있나 띠낭라양한테니 창대지든지 또 종지 요사 데니 또 지금 알모그 가지나 댄싱 띠낭라 창대지 요사 든딘 those.
There is a couple of sort of perhaps doubts or questions that are sometimes raised by people. For example, in the East, alcohol is quite often used in cooking, and in the West, sometimes chocolates have liqueur centers and fillings. Do both of these contexts constitute having consumed alcohol?
다 든지 인딩 아주 다른 아주 만 가시가 나라양 때니 때 창대지 요사 든지 요레지 대소 아주 za chocolate 조금 말이 지나지.
And in addition, there is also some medicines that have alcohol in them. In these three situations, chocolates and cooking and medicine, consuming them, is this consuming alcohol?
다들 축도 뭐 축고 예와데 강지치니 시고 그래지나 배나가 존디 나라 더니 창대지 요나 딩네디 응부디 만인나자가 저 자마인나자 디 잡잖아 어디나라 창도 삼지티니 창거 좋아이나 창거 점아이나 서로 딘지 공큰 딘지 있나 딘이다 자축고 말이지 자나 다른 양자나 딘이 창통하다 주바린도 그래서
If when we're eating something like a chocolate and we're very clear that what is inside it is something that has the taste and smell of alcohol, and whilst still knowing this and being very clear about it, we decide to eat it, then yes, this is still consuming alcohol.
Then 다 만이나 자마이나 디나라 되니 창 요나양 아주 자비 값을 되니 그 창거 좀 살보메나 자나요 초콜릿 좀 말이
If we're consuming medicine or food which has had alcohol in it, but when we're eating it, we don't strongly perceive its smell or taste, so we're not aware of it, then this is not consuming alcohol.
야, 되니 다 소소 삼로즈 당시 소소 되니 가서 되니 창대 되니 문통지 켈린시 탑사레다 탑사 마레 가르테 탑나 되니 파윤 하장 진보 요래 가서 되니 켈린시니 돈바지고 그래 되니 가르테 자와니 마타나 되니 다 마지나 초코리 갈레갈레 지마 남 되니 가서 차진양 본좀나 디캅스지나 초코리 되니 탑나지고 그래.
So everybody please carefully think about the first precept, refraining from consuming alcohol. Think about whether it's something that you could take on, whether it's something or something that is not appropriate for you to take on at this point. Of course, if you could take it on, there is great benefit and there's great merit in doing so, but please think carefully in relation to your own circumstances about whether this vow is something you are willing to commit to.
Then 가서 다른 돈닥진도지 돈닥지 보드가르지나 가서 보그출라더니 상학라더니 로종신ken 초 더니 깝깝스더니 총코르 회공 총코르 제근도지 더니 총코르 나라 샤데즈데즈다더니 창데즈더니 요고 그래지 더니 옛나더니 디더니 가서 다 총코르 나니 더니 창데 가서 통 초코레다 조금 말이제나지.
There's just another little question on the first precept of refraining from consuming alcohol. If we're Vajrayana practitioners and in the process of tantric ritual, talk, etc., we sometimes have to consume a little bit of alcohol. Are we allowed to do this? If we take on the this precept about refraining from alcohol, then can we consume alcohol in the context of this ritual?
더니 총코르 그 창이나 더니 가서 저다 감북강 또 더니 망본 통나는 더니 도마냠조 그래 더니 통 조금 말해.
If in the process of doing the ritual we consume a lot of alcohol, then this is breaking the vow.
오늘 싸니 만통나양 저거 말이.
Of course, not consuming it at all is not permissible or all right in the context.
오늘 다 강리스고 그래서 가서 락바 용바 그때니다 때 좀뭐 니바텔라 때네 가서 전락제 그래 때는데 배나 창디나라 요나 때는 디나라 창 때니 좀뭐 디나라 시션니 때니 좀뭐 돌아 때전 거나 때니 가능라 때니 저거 그래서 때니 다틴 저거 때니 망본 통양 그 말이.
So if this is the case, how should we go about negotiating our conduct in the context of tantric ritual? With our fourth finger, what we can do is dip it in the alcohol, touch it to our tongue, and then this will constitute having fulfilled our proper ritual action without having broken our first precept of refraining against consuming alcohol.
대당 자부지니 베나가서티 총코르가나 샤데지요 그래지 있나 당아서 베나 샤쇼거더니 다 나라 베나 야한자 보인다 되니다 타바 진보 출라 로종신게 뜻고 나라더니 샤마젠큰 샤마잔큰 하자 망부요 그래지 요나 되니 코랑 촌자 보이나 되니티 ngacho chongkhor ka nangla yo pa shati za chokore ta chokom mari zenazi.
And this is similar to the issue of consuming meat in the context of tantric ritual for people who, being Mahayana practitioners, are vegetarian. What should they do? How should they correctly behave or conduct themselves in this situation?
Teni ti shate ngacho teni to kam shini teni mar zana mambo zana na teni za choko mari se. Ina tsawani mazana yo jugumari.
In that situation, to have one mouthful after the next of meat, eating lots of it, is of course not okay. But then to completely not have any contact with it in the context of the ritual is also not okay. So what do we do then?
다원아 가서 간디체고 그래서나 되니 상 코란 거 낭라 되니 간디체고 되니 상 코란 거 낭라 때 서로 샤요리스.
Well, what we should do in this context is actually described quite clearly in the Tantric scriptures.
되니 서로 샤요나 서로 간디샤한테나 배랑 가서 되니 총코르 거 낭라 요비 샤데 되니 코랑 샤자바니 머장큰 것들이 뭐지 있나요? 대체 자고 그래서 자기들 신리스 고그러잖아. 다 띵나니 총총데 간디스라 저근데잖아. 되니 샵정 그 깡바타워서 송어르지. 샵정스나 창인잖아 공도가. 어야 창인 그 깡바스나 다 하정되니 된 잡막 여기 말이데. 된디서 랑네 되니 가능랍지 고그랬어.
So what the scriptures advise for people in this situation to do is to consume a piece of meat that is as small and microscopic as a fly's leg.
Yeah. They talk about the Ninga to Chonkorchians in Italy, Shamamboza, Changmombon, Tondishina, Chonkor Marizi.
So it's clearly not okay in the context of talk to go crazy, drinking lots of wine and consuming lots of meat.
원장들이 가서 출라 로종시 살나 다 염루지 가서 남바 출라 로종시 살티다 인담만다 되니 샤자고 샤티 파 빵고 그러잖아 빵 털나 할리바 역보요 그래서 인나 되니 가서 되니 샤티 빵 마타나 되니 출라 로종시 와자 시탑자와니 메바타와 되니스 말이지.
Having taken refuge or having commenced study of the Buddha Dharma, it's not required, of course, that everybody gives up meat and becomes vegetarian, or that if people who don't give up meat and don't become vegetarian can't study the Dharma. This is absolutely not the case at all.
되니 가시 그제나 내 남바가 출할 때니 로종 시 삼근도 때니 내 남바가 추 점나 삼근도 다 있나 다 샤자 맞춰나 때니 내 접탑사 말이지니 때니 제근도 때니 고 때니 고 말이지.
There are some people who express a lot of interest in studying the Dharma and a lot of interest in learning about Buddhism, but feel that in order to do so, they have to give up meat. And so they feel discouraged. They feel it's not something they're able to do. Well, there's absolutely no need for them to feel this way.
Then 샤자다 마사지 기타 때랑아서 돈바담 제가 직지요 말지 이 jor라다리 샤다 창진이 디 jor라 샤바에 마토바 땡아서 때랑 그 돈바 말이.
Eating meat or giving it up is not among the vows that we are talking about today. I was just talking about this on the side. What we're talking about is refraining from alcohol.
어야 당아서 창문통스기 돈바더 되니 당아서 되니 다 소소 되니 켈린시 텅큰 상마가 켈린시 더월에 상상가 소소 당약 보즈 겨 되니 소소 셈나라 잡득약 보즈 지 되니
Okay, so for those here tonight who feel that refraining from alcohol is something that they can do and want to do, who are willing to commit themselves to taking on this vow, please think about it carefully, and having done so, if you're willing to take on this precept, please raise your hand. Just a second.
나라서 니마 대랑네 종아서 심아선 거 파트 되니 네 창통거 문 삼네 네 창문 통제고 돈바티 지금 삼근 사마 되니 락바적고 그래서.
So the aspiration, the attitude in which we take this vow is that from today onward until the day of my death, I will refrain from consuming alcohol. That is the nature of the vow that we are committing ourselves to. If you are willing to do so, then please raise your hand.
달라 받으셨어. 다 말셨어. 다 빼야 버려. 랍숑 소 물고 랍숑 같이 돈바지 살ken 소고 말. 다티 돈바 당보레스. 데니다 돈바 니파레스. 돈바 니파. 데니 돈바 니파티 가레스나 데니 가서 다 몸무사 파티레스. 가서 몸무사 삼데 가서 먹소금은 삼게 데니 켈렌탐자 티 돈바 니파티레스.
So now we're going to move on to the second precept, which is to refrain from taking life, from killing other beings.
테니 가서 뭐뭐사제야 테니 강르즈나 가서 뭐테니다 뭐테 가서 남바즈나 뭐테 강라 운전 그래즈나 테니 몰라 뭐 침보 테니 가서 라오 테니 요레스 테니 테 마이바 부총총 테니 다와니 섬지 테니 테니 시바 총총 야 인어 테니 요레스 테니 다른 코바가 나라 용큰 거 테니 지금 니마 카실리 덤착직 덤착가 닌자 보인칸 테니 지금 테니 다와직 다와 닌자 보인칸 테니 데 코바가 나라 용큰 거 테니 다 부총총 마르키 마선 그이나 대양 테니 먹 잡라 테니 쯔고레스.
Okay, so within the concept of life, we're referring not only to adults, fully grown human beings, but also young children and also unborn life that within in the embryonic stage or the fetal stage of existence.
테니 가서 뭐뭐사 삼바티 칭니 가서 테니 다 뭐침보 당테니 뭐침보 인난자 총총 인난자 테니 마르키 차르킨 거 뭐게 무수 삼바 대 맞아 빠테니 더 수소랑 그 코바가 나라 용큰 거 테니 다뭐 테니 다보 총총 테니 땡에 무슨 만통야다 테니 고닝에 무슨 삼바가 테니 더 담자티 고리 테니 뭐뭐사지 테니 슬라제그레.
So we need to make the promise to not to kill beings, all beings, whether they be adults, small children, or unborn life.
테니 무사방에 삼로 담바에 나가서 잠바페나 뭐 마르키 차르켄 거더니 뭐도 참아가 못었지도 켈린더니 가부요 말했다가 서이나 때 망치시고 가서 켈린시 톱그레스.
It's probably quite easy for most people to vow not to kill a being that has already been born, a life that is existent from the point of view of our naked eye.
이나 테니다 다 ྔ르식 바제나 테니 코바 나라 용큰 거 테니 다 야지 보고 총총 테니 다 만돈이 사바데 가서 잠발랑 거 돌아 할리바가 테니 망보레 테니 또소 망보즈 거 테니 사크요레 가시 거 싸와니 무사바가 잡라 가시 말에 뭐 망보즈 그때 무사바가 잡라 싸와니 jakeo 말에.
But in terms of unborn life, babies that are still in the inside their mothers, there are so many people around the world who terminate this life without considering that this is in fact killing.
원장 테니 다 디산나 만통니 산나 테니 무사바다 무잠발라 즈자바다 멘다잡니 사바다 찍바리 테니 득바요레.
But taking medicine to end the life of a baby who is a fetus is the same as taking a knife to kill another being or a gun to kill another being.
원장 테니 가서 코바가 나라 테니 더 부고총총 마착비 공로도 테니 더 만통야이나 탑실라 테니 采取措施等这些呢的没等这些呢的重要嘛的값을 때라 테니 다 무사비 테니 득바도 요 말에. 采取措施避孕
However, if we were to take contraceptive measures to avoid the arrival of an unborn life, then this would not be considered killing or taking of life.
테니 테인디 당가서 뒤토라 테니 탐식거든요. 잡잡제나 테니 교요 말에 뒤돈바도 참아지나 저 그래서.
So we should pay attention to this point. Taking all of this into account, this vow is probably one that everybody can take on.
테니 가서 당가 연축 테니 빼나 뭐 망보 나라다 가서 샤쇼라 페나 니 카시가 케드니 부든 get그지 든지 만톤이 sab장즈 젠큰 든지 요레지 만나야 망치슈고 든지 흠지 든지 산두지 다 요나 이니 뭐 망보고 띠띠 득바요지다 무사바다 소자와니 띠나라 든지 자케야 만득다 때 할리바가 득바 침보레 때나 nga마 든지 그다 든지 보고 총총 만톤이 sab바 든지 요나 든지 소소 마소 카성 도르지 생화가 든지 다데 득바 머게와 파르샤야 같으니 탑샤바 띠라 띠니 띠니 소소 샤바야 보셔야 돼 빼깔 침보레.
So there are so many people who or I guess women who in the course of their lives have terminated many unborn lives. There is great demerit, there is great sin attached with this kind of action, and for people who have done this, it's very important that they apply themselves to purification practices such as the Vajrasattva teaching that I gave a couple of days ago.
Tani ta ngacho tendishini ta terang ngacho tani dombajini ta mumusakite kilimshi jana tani to ngacho tahanga yanchu tani ga ta tani mantoni tani poguchong sabanda tani yona So for
a person who has terminated the life of an embryo or of a fetus before, then taking the vow to refrain from taking lives is the best way that this demerit and sin can be purified.
오야 다티니 소속은 당약보 잡니 되니 다 다리 쳔디 토라 되니 뭐뭐사기 등이 킬링인 되니 또 돈바트 저인 삼컨소 되니 아주 락바자네 킬링제고레.
So please everybody think very carefully about this vow, about whether it's something you can commit to, and if it is, please raise your hand.
다 락바초쇼스 막 야, 다약본득 빼약본득스요. 다티 돈바 니파 데레 돈바 당보치 당보 창문 통화지 되니 니파 뭐뭐서 다 돈바 선바티 하정가 레라보레.
Now moving on to the third precept. This one's a real easy one.
다 레라보 간디스 돈바 선바티 간디스 라제그레즈 나 페나 카시가 되니 다 코랑 랑라 오야 되니 롱턴 원시 고도와 신통 오야 Tendi chichi mena teni korang ka murnam teni nguh korea teni tendi tonda teni ngarang la longton yose ngarang la ngwenshi yose teni ngarang ka hairam thonggon dogse ngayer ka nyarwan thong ngarang ka nyarwan thong yose lam thong yose dream thong yose tendi damra shine melang gorkur tanga teres.
So there are some people who claim to have all kinds of special magical attainments, the ability to see into the future, or the ability to to be able to see ghosts and deities, to see into worlds and have other special magical capacities that other people don't, and trick people, deceive people on this basis.
Oh yeah, then also. 다 땡지고네 나랑라티니 원심메나 요제 롱턴메나 요제네 땡지게 먼남고 코리아가 돈데 땡지 진랍제 땡지 땡게 셰크먼 땡무시치 땡게 돈바티 제인 삼컨소고 땡이 양아서 락바자네 담자체고레.
So this vow is about pledging not to claim that one has special powers when one does not. And for those who are willing to take this vow, please raise your hands. Okay, so for the younger people here tonight, then probably these three vows in themselves are pretty good if you are able to take them.
Yeah, tati tola gargi tola teni tangazo songjab murgo teni lekale murgunken teni chumsang kakso murgunken te sola daron dombani yod.
But for those of us who are older, who don't need to look after families and don't need to make a living, go to work, etc., then it would be great if you could take on the next two vows as well.
Teni domba nite kangrezina domba chikdene teni ngaso kummushi pateres mojambala kummushi kiteres.
So the fourth vow then is not to steal.
Teni ngaso me mampoz ka samlo tana ka ngaso shek marete gargi menna ngaso yante domba tijina chokjire ngaso ka shek me samne teni samkan ngaso nala mambo yokires.
Of course, many people think, well, of course I don't steal. I don't steal. Why would I steal? I never steal. Many people would think like this.
When tate rete yena teni ngaso te nyokta chiporezi te nyokta chimpo yenti teni ngaso te thola zabza machina ta jin te domba te jivjana te tate chungjab konkinda te yena te kabu yore tate majina gagaris.
But this really is a pretty delicate one, one that we need to take a lot of care on. It's not quite as straightforward as what people might think. And so for that reason, people who do business as their livelihood would probably be best advised not to take this vow. Of course, if you think, no, I absolutely must take this vow, well then please go ahead and take it. Of course, if you're able to take 4 precepts, take on 4 vows, then there's great benefit and great merit in doing so. Oh, yeah, okay. And then moving on to the next precept, which is about refraining from sexual misconduct. So when we talk about sexual misconduct, what we are meaning is becoming involved with a member of, with a person who is involved in another relationship, and in so doing destroying or harmfully impacting on their family.
Tani lojongji karte ta sarvi jis o te kamonje mendu ngarang tini ta jina thosare samna tani jima tini kyoran so jina chokres tini terang rapoina taron choso hako mena tini lonyong so jemorgo tini garge lotikchi renga lodenche tini yancho so jina chokres.
So of course, becoming involved with someone who's already married or who's already in a committed relationship is only one aspect of sexual misconduct. There's obviously other aspects or other kinds of behavior that constitutes sexual misconduct. The best thing to do would be for everyone to read about this and familiarize themselves with it. They don't need to take the vow tonight, but by thinking about whether or not that is in fact something that they can take on. It's probably not the easiest or most advisable vow for a young person to take on, but those who are 65 or 70, well, it's probably okay.
Oh yeah, tatini ngaso domba jikito ngaso ta domba jiki tabdu genzi teni tarong karchimbo hachang karchimbo chugyoze ganrezina teni ngaso domba terang ngaso kyamru shigo watang teni domba shigo ya teni gimsende ganre teni ti gonlong te hachang karchimbo reze gonlong tongji oh yeah te hachang karchimbo re teni teng chusha ke yente zabzab chi nyuen chos.
Okay, so it's really important, really important that we understand and keep in mind at this point our aspiration in taking these vows. What is our motivation for doing so?
Oh yeah, teni ngaso tela teni gonlong tela ngaso ramba mapu ramba rambo ramba thombo teni sumyo.
Within the motivation that we might have for taking on the vows, there are 3 levels.
Teni ramba mapo de gangrezina ngaso ta ngarang rang tini chu zaji yoya kunji yoya teni nachi chaji tini mepa teni chu lamro longsta yakbo yongje shawa lamro yakbo yongya teni zi ko tondala teni ngaso teni domba tjina teni te kalno hachang mamori teni na yakbo yo mares.
So the lowest kind of motivation that we could take these vows with would be for our own well-being, for our own prosperity, for our own luck. This would be the lowest kind of motivation and really not a good kind of motivation.
Teni nipa te kangrezena teni ta ngarang chikpote teni korwa yani tarne teni kirga danche dungor meparene ngarang chikpote tarwa topna ta te zang yakbore ti tonda teni ngi domba jegen samna ta te rumba nipa te te yakbo maris.
The next level up for that would be to undertake to pledge the vows with the motivation to escape or liberate oneself from the sufferings of samsara for one's own self.
Tani ta chi yakshu te kangrezena teni nga chu shangship ko sem nga chu tari nima khashigna la nima takbar sheyo te re te indi teni ta nga chu tari domba jiwi kaps teni shangship ko sem go ore ri nga chu namki ta nge semchin tamche la nge teni phamba drip ko yin di tond semchin tamche la phamba dripi tond teni nga sangji go ta nge sangji ya go tond teni nge te nga chamro je go yin domba je go yin samne teni sam go ore.
Of course, the best motivation, the highest motivation, is that of bodhicitta, that in order to be of benefit to all beings, I need to and want to obtain Buddhahood. And in order to achieve Buddhahood, I am going to take refuge and take on these vows. It is with the motivation of bodhicitta, the highest motivation, which is the highest motivation with which we could take the vows today.
Oh yeah, that Sama ngacho gindenba sama yar jamur go mar jing duzi te maemba jamba ngacho garginda napanda yar lang matham kantendi yona yar malang na chokore jamba thamchipo yar lang ni teni di tomba ndini ngacho tomba sanji shakja tapa kirchindu teni jablo la teni sanji kirchindu tela teni ngacho shakhsam sar go gres yar lang ni shakhsam sar.
Okay, so can everybody please stand up except for perhaps those who are old or incapacitated and are unable to stand? Could everybody please stand up and make 3 prostrations to the Buddha we have here in front and behind? Slowly, slowly is okay.
Oya teni shakhsam tsar tsawi jisata mar ndig jong teni mar ndig ti sama ngazo bimuni zigni ndig gore kui mar ndig na ndig ki mare bimuni zigni ndig gore.
Having sat down, can everybody please kneel?
Oya teni lakbani pondendishine tharmo jars
and place your 2 hands together.
Oya teni ta ngazo domba ji ranson te na domba de ngazo sem gthone yakbo shini jego re ma to bata ngazo sem gthone yakbo shemena teni kha ngazo teni choga te sindona ti domba top kore zina top ko marez.
And really hold and commit to these vows in your own heart. It's not enough to just speak the words. Speaking the words without the inner conviction is not undertaking the vows.
Tani ta tendi yending ka tari kong du shapati so thamchipo yankir ngim dur dini chi shapayen ta thamchipo yakpoz nyunni sem gthone zabnan chi tini zabzab chi nandan chi ne sem gthola yakpoz jerni tani tsamaga tani nga chu choga ten dong go res.
So I'm just going to briefly go over each of them again. Can everybody please listen very carefully and very sincerely, reflect on them and hold them in their hearts and in their minds, and then we will recite the
오야 되니 당가서 네 샤사송 오야야 되니 가서 당에 양식처럼 돌디니샤나 돈 다른 가서 돈바시지텔라 되니 름박스미오스 고름스미오스 상그 부조 고름스미오스.
So there are going to be 3 stages.
당보디 강에서나 되니 참아가 샘kit되고 샹심속도 샘kit바되고 오래 참아가 당에 심진 탐시 그 돈도 되니 네 상기 되니 공방 톱고 심진 탐시 그 돈도 되니 네 상기 접고인 다디 돈도 되니 네 대랑 돈바지요 삼니 정말 참아가 대 삼고 오래 대 당보인.
So the first stage is the generation of bodhicitta, that today I take these vows because in order to benefit all beings, I will obtain Buddhahood. And it is in order to benefit beings that I aspire to obtain Buddhahood. By generating the mind of bodhicitta, this is the first stage.
Maso jamjori teni ta nima terang ni zongte ngarang ka tombana sanji shakja ta bayin teni ngarang ka drupki chu teni nge namba sanji pa chu ta drupko yin teni ngarang ka teni chu drupi teni chu jok teni namba sanji pa chu nyam silen kon te so yin samba ka tamja de jego ore te nibare.
And the second stage is vowing that from this day forth the Buddha is my guide on the Dharma path. The teachings, the Dharma that I am going to study and learn and apply is the Buddha Dharma, and that my companions, my Dharma companions, are fellow Buddhist practitioners. Generating these vows is the second stage.
Tani sambati kangrezena ta nga cho tari domba nga yin nanda domba nga ji kitab dukche onanda sosorang ka domba sim ji kitab dukche ona ni ji kitab dukche ona te tani nge terang ni domba peda nga cho domba sim ji ki na nge nima terang ni nge chang monthong ni mosa tani nge tani jamba ti jamba ta oyorje jamba ngo korwi chet tani nge longten mena yo tani mazi tani nge domba simbo te terang jeyin samne tani semtak.
And then the third part is pledging and vowing in your own minds regarding the lay precepts that you are willing to undertake, whether they be again refraining from consuming alcohol, from taking life and killing other beings, from sexual misconduct, from stealing, from lying, whichever you decide to commit yourselves to, please generate this vow very sincerely in your own minds. And we need to say this to the Buddha. We need to offer this to the Buddha, our pledge.
Teni jikita kanti goni jagrezena teni tanti nala teni choga teni ziore teni ti choga tanga chu sangi kumden yar ndonni teni jigori choga nandun te kanrezena ngacho tari nge konto shapati chores.
And the way that we are going to tell this to the Buddha, to offer this to the Buddha verbally, is by reciting the following prayer, the following words, and the meaning of these words is what I have spoken about this evening in relation to both the refuge and the lay precepts.
Teni chogaden don bi kapsa teni nge tangbo don gyen teni nge tsaka ching don na teni kyochu nge jiblu chene teni nge jis nge tsaka ching don na teni kyochu tsaka ching don ne teni chene nga cho kor masum la teni don go res.
So how we will proceed is that I will recite one line and then you will repeat after me.
Teni nga cho lansum totong don charwi jis lansum batin don charwi kapsna mjik zopi kapsa teni sosola jamro don bata gemyin go don ba ni te teni tomro ret.
And after we've done these recitations 3 times each, then you will have taken the refuge vows and the lay precept vows.
Tani tanga suteni de don chokat don bi kapsa tini tanga suteran dinala karg madawa samyore te na ta 지그 돈인 돈다 대즈레사 말했더니 나게 정말 가지고 볼그 돈이 신 돈디 되니 가지고 보바다 되니 가지고 되니 또네 너쇼바 코소고 되니 양 볼그 대즈더니 양 보다 되니 네 지루시 특질이 되나 네 볼그 되니 또다 초가던 돈디 되니 가지고 보바소다 되니 너쇼바소 되니 냠도 지루 지쇼스.
Tonight, among everyone here, we have Tibetans, we have Chinese, and we have
yeah,
and Westerners. So we're going to divide the taking of the vows into two sections. First, I'm going to read in Tibetan, and could all the Tibetans and Westerners here please follow me in reciting the Tibetan.
Oh yeah. Deni ni pat deni jark ko deni indi chokaten dondi deni cho jam sama deni jiluchi shos.
Yeah. And then in the second section, those Chinese speakers here tonight can follow me in repeating the vows in Chinese.
Yeah, deni sama ngai jiluchi sho zhenba gong shi sor. 然后你们跟着我念啊。大德一心垂念我，等你当个说让那个忙的这个人，等你参加个忙的这说啊，大忙，马上大忙了，其实那这个人大忙。
Oh, at this point, everybody needs to say their own name.
Oh yeah. 参加个等你个说不把错。就那把个忙的，等下说学的那学班那可说了忙吃人呐，这些个的，大忙嘛是啊，可能个忙这些个的。
Yes. So don't say Dagmung because that means my name. Please say your own name, whatever it is.
Oh yeah, Dagmung.
Catherine Handy.
Oh yeah. 然后大家要说出自己的名字啊，我名。好，可以，好，可以了呀。等你们听见呢，听的呢，容的，这正所以玩的，刚你南京说，三节啦夹什说，多恰当，这玩南京说。Chula gyabshim cho, Tsok nam gyam cho, Gendan la gyabshim cho, Dak tindane zonte, Chichen tsui warte, Givnyin de, Zunbe zonte sur. 好呀，好，然后你们跟着我念啊，重新来啊。大德一心垂念我，我名，从此世起，终身皈依佛，两祖尊，皈依法，立与尊，皈依僧，众众尊。请达德，从此世起，乃至终身使者，设我为居士。好，可以了。呀，大地里样啊说，也拿唐尼巴的呢，参马个样记录节啊，真把公司说了，大忙。
Please say your name again here.
好呀，听的呢，容的，这正所以玩的，刚你南京说，三节啦夹什说，多恰当，这玩南京说，出来夹什说，错南京说。Gendan la gyabsam cho, Dak tin da ne zonte, 제천 소위 와르드
제천 소위 와르드
기브닌도
게니엔더
진비종도 소르
진베소든 소르
아야 다드니 다른 차치고 그랬던 가서 워크 차치도 다른 돈 좋아 양 탐치 보바초다 참마 지루지야 진바 공스 소르
진바 고츠 소르
라나 그 망제 고래야 다망
Please say your name.
아야 틴던 집게와
틴틴 집게와르
틴던이 종스티
디데네 종테
제천 소위 와르드
제천 소위 와르드
간니 남김초
감니 남긴초
산게라 잡숨초
상게라 갑선초
노착당
로차당
자와 남김초
자와 남긴초
출라 잡숨초
슐라 갑선초
속 남김초
소남긴초
겐단라 잡숨초
겐델라 갑선초
닥 틴던이 종스티
닥티네 종테
제천 소위 와르드
제천 소위 와르드
기브닌도
게니엔더
진비종도 소르
좀베선든 소르
아야 당에 탑이노지디 참마가 락소지 고래야 탑이노
라소
哦呀，好，接下来我们念这个仪轨，大家跟着我念啊。大德一心垂念我，
大德一心垂念我，
我名
我名
从此世起，
从此世起，
终身皈依佛，
终身皈依佛，
两祖尊，
两祖尊，
皈依法，
皈依法，
立与尊，
立与尊，
皈依神，
皈依神，
众种尊，
众种尊，
请达德，
请达德，
从此世起，
从此世起，
乃至终生实至，
乃至终身之至，
设我为
设我为
居士。
居士。
好，再来最后一遍啊！大德一心垂念我，
大德一心垂念我，
我名从此世起，
从此世起，
终身皈依佛，
终身皈依佛，
两祖尊，
两祖尊，
皈依法，
皈依法，
立与尊，
立与尊，
皈依神，
皈依神，
众种尊，
众种尊，
请达德，
请达德，
从此世起，
从此世起，
乃至终身实至，
乃至终身世至，
设我为居士。
设我为居士。
好，最后我说此乃方便的时候，大家说善在啊，此乃方便。
善哉。
好，야, 드니 가서 다른 말은 등만 줘 다른 들지도 드니 가서 다른 질루식시고 그래. 드니 질루식도 가서 참아 드니 냠도 드니 시나 쳐. 드니 나 티값서 다뜨세죠. 드니 다른 질루식시고 등가서 참아 냠도 시나 그래.
Okay. So there's one more recitation that we need to do, one more repetition. If you could repeat after me, we can all do it together, everybody together.
야, 드니 가서 질루 지마티 값은 가서 간디 삼고 그래제나 드니 다다리 가서 공도 돈바 쓰면 나다 돈바니 나다 또 참아 다 돈바티 지차송 대나 드니 가서 돈바도 간디 종고 그래제나 다 가서 문진 팍바 잡좀바지나 문지 잡좀바티 소리 콩소 돈바 간디 종나 네 드니 종고 네 코솔라 로종제 연 삼네 드니 삼고 그래서
So what we are doing here is vowing to follow in the footsteps of the arhats who have gone before us, and vowing that in doing so we will follow them in their actions, in their learning, in their conduct.
어단데 영아수 영 디자크다 볼거냐 이와서 데즈 마시나 영 리사 말이 다 당보 영아수 뽑아서다 되니 노쇼 바소 인스.
Actually, it's probably best again if we do separate it. So firstly, we will do the Tibetan and afterward the Chinese.
당보 데지다 디양아 참마가 등아서 뽑아서다 잠바서 지루치쇼아 소혼 공스 소르
Lokan loso so
제스터 훈지 팍바
jit nunki papa
잡좀바
잡좀바
데다거
데다그
제춘 소이 와르드
jitun soy warta
스톡조 파fan데
chokchupa tamdi
스톡조 파리 lar lopa devjin de tani yang so rang mang de go re dag mang jib gewe kyang tin de ne zonte chchen choi warte chok par fande chok pa le lar dog par gyo yanlak tangbon di dang pakpa dap chumba Teta ke lapa la jisu lapo jisu jepo jisu gito yang jerter ngunjin pakpa dap chumba Teta ke jechen cui warte oh ya tatini ngaso kumshike tini dombaji 용큰 소고더니 대 지루지 금시게 돈바지 맨큰 소고 지루시 머고지 단디 석석디 올라요 비츠가직도.
So the next repetition is for those who have taken pledged to take on the vow of not stealing.
마신 벌렘바당. 아야. 데니다 니바디 영아초티니 놀록 teni ta kilimshi menken dolok moshi piteni ta dombaji menken so do murgozi teni ta ji onken ko domba te ji onken so teni tonshos.
And the next one is pertains to sexual misconduct. So for those who are not going to take on this vow, there's no need to do the repetition.
Ndot pe loper yemba tang. Oya ta teni 어떤 더 참아 같은 거 가지고 바지오리 참아 용족 같은 다네 야무 말이야 잠바 참아 같은 데 지루치쇼스.
And the next section, everybody can do the repetition. It's going to be in Tibetan though, and it will follow in Chinese. So first the Tibetan repetition.
진도 나와당. 어야 다더니 어거든 가서 창문 통제 켈림시 용큰 소거 Teni jilushego re changman tongje dombaji mena jilushego mares.
Oh, the next one is about refraining from consuming alcohol. So for those who are not going to take on this vow, there's no need to do the repetition.
Mri changdang jubi chang nyuper ngerwa warme pirnir pande warme pirnir pangba devjin de 다양 수속 망제 고그래 닥망 집게외 장 딘더네 존테 제튼 초이 와르트 어야 다 다리다 직바이나 가서 다린디 도 금시께 같더니 돈발레 멘큰 소지 때 머고 되니 용큰 소 담잡시 용큰 소 되니 지루지아 되니 어디지쇼.
So this is for those who this is the vow against stealing. Those who are not going to take this vow, no need to do the repetition.
마신 벌렘바당 다니 단 돌록 것더니 돈바지 용큰 소이나
용큰소.
용큰소.
And this is for those who are taking the vow against sexual misconduct.
노베 로퍼엠바당 다 창마이나
This is for and this one is for those who are taking the vow against for refraining from consuming alcohol.
New Peringerva, Verme Pirnele, Lardopper Jogo. Oya, Tenitanaso, Dombar Ngayona, Yanlak Ngapon Dizi, Dombar Simgiona, Yanlak Sumbon Dizi, Dombar Nigiona, Teni Yanlak Nippon Dizi, Tenizia, Ne Yanlak Ngapon Dizi, on Chusutinize Gore.
Yawang.
That is the Kimalan of Takinanka Chimbomandu. 야 데니 참마 근데 다 지루 지쇼아 양락nga 본디
Yalong pudi
dang phakba
ta papa
dabchumba
japchumba
데다가
teta
라바라
la
지스 라보
jisu labo
지스 드보
jisu dubo
지스 getto
jisu judo
아야 데니 당에 타베노지 티 락소지 쇼와 타베노
laso
아야 다치소 만득쇼 데니 당아주 야소이나接下来那个对你们跟着我念啊，我们要念一遍啊。念这个衣柜的时候呢，我们要这样子发心啊。我们刚才就受了3条戒和5条戒，或者是2条戒啊。那么我们刚才受的这些戒，我们怎么样护持这些戒呢？我们向过去的阿罗汉学习。过去的阿罗汉怎么样守戒，怎么样持戒，我就怎么样持戒啊！我要向他们学习啊，这样子发心，然后大家跟着我念啊。愿是垂念我，往昔圣者阿罗汉，如何断除杀生，而不杀生。如是，我明，宜从此世起，乃至终身时至，断除杀生，而不杀生。我以此意志，向圣者阿罗汉。至学处，虽修，虽学，虽做。此外，往昔圣者阿罗汉，如何断除？好，这个时候我们刚才受了偷盗戒的，跟着我念；没有受偷盗戒的不念了啊。盗取。好，然后受了邪淫戒的跟着我念，没有受的就不念啊。邪淫，好，大家一起啊。妄语，然后呢，我们受了酒戒的跟着我念，没有受酒戒的不念了啊。古酒，纠纷，能嘴，方意治无。好，大家一起啊。如是。我明，宜从此世起，乃至终身时至。好，受了不偷盗的啊，不盗；受了不邪淫的啊，不邪淫。大家一起啊，不妄语。好，受了纠结的啊。不应孤酒，纠纷，能嘴，方意治无。好，然后我们受了5条戒的，要说我以此无执；3条戒的就说我以此3智；2条戒的就说我以此2者啊。我以此无执，向圣者阿罗汉，至学处。虽修，虽学，虽做。好，然后我说此乃方便，大家说善哉，此乃方便。好，呀，这里我做给你个东巴，大家住东巴，长马这里，长马拉这里人才松死。
So now we have completed the refuge vows and the lay precept vows.
这里我做给你个东巴呢，供的这里学才松，这里讲究东巴招人那这里他学过的，他这样提出的是公众的，这那这里说说讲究这里他吃更上拉嘛个家弄着的，这里接当的全部这里拉姆人着的，相信拉姆人全部哦，这里他这说那拉大的，这里讲究这里拉下，还讲个大地波的，忙不要嘛的，这那拉有的，这他妈个路上要不接。
We've probably spoken in a bit more depth about the lay precepts tonight, but didn't perhaps speak as much about refuge. There are lots and lots of written instructions on refuge, though, that everybody can consult and indeed should. The words of my perfect teacher, Lamrim, etc. Please, everybody, acquaint yourselves with with teachings on having taken refuge.
Tani ngazo tari domba jipate kong de jipi domba te so tani ngazo wame ke gone nanda mashi sa nanda domba te karte nyam songna tani kandi che go ure zena.
So from this point on, what do we do if for some reason we break our vows?
Tani tambo ngazo tani domba te nyam songna tambo tani shakbapshi go ures.
The first thing that we need to do is to confess.
Shakba kandi she go zena tani karsa ngazo shapi dorji sin hwa tani de anyimbo toji te gumni tani ongbandr sato hong chisu jipchi tamba 40万 dongo ures. Ongbandr sato hong.
Oh yeah, okay. So the way that we go about confessing is in accordance with the Vajrasattva practice that we talked about that we learned about a couple of days ago. So this involves the Vajrasattva meditation and a recitation of the Vajrasattva heart mantra 400,000 times.
Tani shakba shi tsarwi jisu tani yang kyer nga tso tani domba te jena chokore tani nga tso ndana sachandala yenna tani nga tso lama mangpon te churkatam kambo ta geshi mangpon te tani kongso kumdun ne tani domba te yang kyer jego res.
And then it's possible, after having done the confession, to take the vow again, to do it in a place and in a situation like this, in front of a Buddha or lamas or khenpos, or in a situation like tonight, to take on the vow again.
Tani jambachi mendu ta domba tsamaga tani yakbo song tani ti thola lojong yakbo je. Tani nyamling yakbo che na tani nga so matsin da tondang danjo damba tani renjo ore tani tsama bachun yakbo che ro na ro nang.
So aside from this, the teaching for this evening finishes here. May everybody hold their vows well, practice well, study well, and proceed stably in your practice from here.
Ya tani nga so dinala ta tinge zikita kadjurmurgo. Tani dina yo pa poba chola jegi. Hoya teina nga so loks ta chu kabdan da tini ge tirko yosa mare. Teina tani nga chundana sachandana tini poba hajang mombo yosare. Tani ke namba cho tini tondak sum semla yak bonje gore. Tondak sum de kang rezina tondak tamboti kang rezina tani nga so sachandala yung charti tani sachandi tani chim tani sachandago julum sachandago rolug. Deso tsangma yakbo teni tana chik tsangzha yinna, zamazalug yinna, gombay kolug yinna, deso tamcho po yakbo zi shine, teni sachandaga teni lukchor, teni mangchoko yir, lukchor, mangchoko samlo, teni koso go chim, deso tsangma la tsinchok yakbo zi che gore mato, teni katso sachandala yoni gangshong mangshong, o teni she zhangna, teni te tsawane yakbo yo mare, yirangbo ndegna yang degtabko mare, teni yakbo yo mare zi, teni yang katso chi makashi teni ta de sachandala yone yang chi tini kumma jab kinda yang chi shawa chi dchak tini lenkenda tini yona ta yinda manda tini sama koda ya potani tini le chok tini le na yakbo yo marezini de sheguri tonda chi yinse tini tonda ni tini ta sachandala yong chawi ji tini soso rang jigni o tini katang yige la so ba tini soso ta choso pama choda soso kata yi shigire ta bo cho tini katang yige machine ken tini mambo yosare te pe yabu 할리바 같으니 다티 득적래 때나 가서 인지가 할리바 약보 시고래 때 마시나 때니 가서 사찬되니 때니 다 가소야다 때 약보 용기 말이다 옛나 때니 다 보이다 볼게 시게 때니 소소고 정거 정니 약보 시게 때 돌아 삼로 당제다 때니 가서 네 사찬달라 보바 추소 할리바 망본도 옛나 띠나라 때니 보바 전부 용거 만들 다 망치와다 가서 야문자와다 teni nirshok mato sore mato ba bubu tsu chibu yungu manduwa de yungu gore teni kyo tso yang teni yungne chuyak bo je 냠린자 약보지 드니 쉐로 지지 동당니 드니 동당 선바가 돌아 드니 가서 사찬달라 늑 자비 지스 드니 가서 보반다 그 나페나 사찬달라 드니 시속라 판토 요야가 드니 레카 싶은 그 레카지 진다다 드니 게레 그 레카지 진다 드니 드니 요나 베나다 아메리카에 난다 데 마임비 사차잠바즈라 드니 지 사욤 쇼나 드니 칠록 쇼나 데 마이나 베나다 징가서 오르보지 드니 다 베나지 가르기인다 옛난다 드니 왕부 마상와다 드니 데소라 로바지 어야 데투 데소고 돌아 가솔라 고르무 망부 메나야 드니 데소소고 셈 것드니 삼반 총야 잠보 드니 것드니 시속고 싶은 걸 레카티 나라 할레바가 지고 그래 대진나 참말라 판토요리는 돈닥선도 드니 참마 셈라 야보자로 제스 드니 데 마토바다 잠바쳐 메드니 가좀 중타 참마 드니 가서 게와 ngෝyen tani gewa ngo kapsa tani nga cho ta du jirgo gre tani gewa ngo chito tani nga cho terang ta domba ji song tani kyamro ji song aya ta ti gewa te tani nga cho simchin tamche la jingyen tani simchin tamche nga cho gewa ndala tani tani sangje go samje go tani samba ya bo jine tani nga cho ngwa shero nang.
So now we are going to dedicate the merit of our practice tonight, the merit that we've generated through taking the vows of refuge and taking the lay precepts. We're going to dedicate the merit to all beings so that they may obtain Buddhahood. And now we will do tonight's dedication.
Sonam dei damja zubanya domne ni be dana banje ja jegana je walon de ba tbim zolen do a do sho oma a hom banzang ger ba ma sa da hom oma a hom banzang ger ba ma Hong Om Ahom Banza Gurabama Sada Hong Otujichi Tashi Dele